In class today, we started to talk a little bit about the different parts of photosynthesis, and we mentioned that it was broken up into two parts. We first started in part 1, the light reactions, remembering, of course, that the overall purpose of photosynthesis is what we stated above. It's where we're going to be taking sunlight or light energy and making food, otherwise known as in the form of glucose, which is a chemical bond type of energy. Step 1 of this was the light reaction, and we're focused inside of the chloroplast. Remember, if we're talking about a chloroplast, and I'm going to draw one of these up here. Here's my chloroplast. It's kind of that oval-like shape. It has these little stacks of pancake-like discs. Each one of these discs is considered a thylakoid, and a thylakoid is exactly where this first step of photosynthesis is taking place, right here on one of those little discs. We said it's called the light reactions because sunlight is needed. What's going to happen is the sunlight's going to shine in and hit the special compound called chlorophyll. That's the green pigment in the plants. And this chlorophyll reacts with sunlight. It creates energy for it. This energy is so strong that it's going to actually split water. Water is something that's coming into a plant. That shouldn't surprise us too much that water is something a plant needs. We know that if we are growing plants, we have to give them water. The water is added into the roots and then it's taken up to the leaves, and this water is in the chloroplast. And when the sunlight hits the chlorophyll, the water is split into a couple of different parts. Some of it turns into oxygen. And oxygen is actually a waste product for a plant. Some of it, if we're left, we have these hydrogen ions, or H pluses, because oxygen and hydrogen would make H2O. And then there's a high energy little electron. That high energy electron is going to get passed around, and eventually it gets picked up by one of those energy carrying molecules that we kind of talked about when we were doing our other sets of notes. Okay, so that high energy electron is going to be taken as NADPH, and that's going to be a byproduct of it. NADPH, like I said, it's an energy-carrying molecule. It doesn't have a lot of efficiency, though. So it's something we're going to use, but it's not our end game. Then, down in our thylakoid, we have this green thing. This green thing's kind of weird. This thing is an ATP maker. It's an enzyme called ATP synthase. And as hydrogen ions, hey, look, remember, we had some hydrogen ions right here, pass through it. It spins. As it spins, it's going to take ADP molecules plus phosphate and turn them into ATP molecules, which is great. This is an ADP plus a phosphate. Turn them into ATP. Awesome. It makes some ATP, not quite as much as we're hoping for, so we're actually going to use this ATP in the next step. But this is really the main goal of step number 1. It's the idea that we're putting in sunlight. We had sunlight here. And we're also putting in water. That was the other reactant that came into the plant cell. And then what we get out of it is going to be this NADPH. And that's going to move on to the next step. ATP, which moves on to the next step. And our oxygen. Our oxygen is going to move out of the cell. We don't need that oxygen for our plant cell anymore. NADPH. and ATP. Both of those are simply energy-carrying molecules. And these energy-carrying molecules are going to end up getting used in step number 2. So we'll talk about that in a second. As I said, our oxygen, it's a waste product for the cell. And as a waste product of the cell, it's just going to end up leaving. So the energy of sunlight is really used here to split that water. And then that water, as it gets split, it can make some ATP and it can go through this process to make some NADPH. It's really an electron transport chain, but you don't need to know much about that. That's going to lead to step